What's up, guys? I have another sheath making video. This time, made my first sheath for a folder. In this case, it's a Spyderco Paramilitary. It's not the 2, it's the Paramilitary 1. It's actually one of the really old generation ones, as you can tell by the jimping on the top of the blade. But you know, ever since I saw the Paramilitary that my friend had, I fell in love with it. It's been like basically one of my favorite knives. You know, it's super comfortable in the hands. The S30V blade gets super sharp. It's, you know, holds the edge really well. It's a nice full flat grind with a really nice, you know, pointy tip for doing fine work. And you know, it has the compression lock, which is super strong. Originally, when I decided to make this sheath, I was actually thinking, you know, it's something that I woke up and I thought, maybe I could use this spider hole to actually almost get the knife to pop open when I pull it out of the sheath. And I mean, for those of you who are into knives, I suppose, you should know about, you know, the Emerson Wave, and Spyderco actually makes a wave, well, 2 waved models. Well, actually 3 waved models, I suppose, if you include the Pical. But then they also have the waved Endura and the waved Delica. I happen to have a waved Delica. But I was thinking, and I made this whole other concept video that I didn't put up. And you know, I made it yesterday and I made the sheath today, and it didn't work out too well. I'm not even going to bother to put up the concept video. But I mean, the general idea was that I would be able to get a sheath so that, you know, the Kydex would actually pinch here at the spider hole. If it was large enough, you know, the Paramilitary does have a normally large spider hole. If you were to pull the sheath out, there would be enough pinching pressure here on the spider hole to actually pop the blade open as you pull the knife out. Basically, it didn't really work. I kind of got the idea from my single finger knuckle, where, you know, at first I used my Dremel to sand this part out. But at first, what happened was, you know, if you see here, it's basically a large hole, and the retention is actually really, really tight. Of course, this is a little different in that this hole is much wider than the spider hole. And since it's flat, you know, there's no extra material here to get in the way. What happened with this sheath is that since I have the thicker Kydex, this is the 0.08 inch thick Kydex, I can't really get super good definition. This is actually my second try. My first try, I kind of put the Kydex in the knife a little sideways, and I got really good definition because I suppose I got the material hot enough and I put enough pressure on it, but it actually made pulling the knife out really hard. And because of all this, you know, extra knife that's in the way, I suppose, of the blade, the Kydex would pull apart, and basically where it was, you know, I don't know if you could really tell from here, but this part was dented in more because of this spider hole. But it would lift apart, and unfortunately there's no way it's going to snag onto that spider hole and keep it, you know, in place, I suppose you could say. I could make it tighter, but the issue is that the knife is impossible to take out of sheath. You know, I was trying, like, even with this, I'm not sure where I'm going to put the top rivet. I want to actually get it so I can mount it on a tech lock. Right now I only have a large tech lock. I'm probably going to order a small tech lock in the future. But you see here, like, I don't really have that much material, like room for me to really put rivets. I suppose I could go with the 2 shorter rivets if I were to carry it horizontally, but if I want to carry the sheath vertically, I'm kind of limited to these 2 rivets. Not a big deal, I'll figure it out. You know, using the clamp, I think I can get away with having it right next to basically the largest hump of the blade, and it'll be tight, but I'm pretty sure I'll be able to pull the knife out. I'll have to work around it. When I molded this sheath, I did it with the pocket clip in. As you can see here, there's a huge gap. Oh, that was one thing that I found difficult about making a sheath for a folder, in that you use a lot less material on a folder than on a fixed blade. You know, if I were to, you know, I'm thinking about making a sheath for my Boker Edit, you know, basically to make a fixed blade sheath, you know, for such a small blade, it's the same amount of material as for, you know, a much larger blade but in a folder form, just because you don't have to cover as much. And the thing is, because this is the thicker Kydex, you can see I have huge gaps here. My first try at molding this, it was actually a lot larger, and this was actually offset a little more like that. So I had to, you know, heat it up and redo it. This I'm pretty happy with. It's pretty even. You can tell that the edges are pretty squared off. There's a little hump here, but it's not a big deal. The knife still retains really well. There's no rattle whatsoever, so it's not bad. You know, I'll probably just cut away here, sand here. I'm not sure how much material I'm going to remove off from here. Obviously, I don't need half the knife in the sheath because this is, you know, extra retention that I really don't need. What I've actually seen from other makers who have made sheaths for folding knives is they only sheath up a small portion of the knife itself. And I might end up doing the same. I'm not sure. I don't really, since it's a folder and not a fixed blade, I don't actually have to go all the way up here. I could probably do like a band here. I'm not really sure. But either way, I molded it with the pocket clip on. In the original Paramilitary, the pocket clip was only one side and it was just right hand carry, tip down. That was one of the big things I hated about this knife. The Paramilitary 2, they corrected that with you know, four position carry. I haven't gotten one yet just because, you know, this knife is still really good, and you know, the Paramilitary 2, while it was actually, the Paramilitary 2 is actually cheaper than the original Paramilitary, which is, you know, I was a little surprised by that. But either way, the knife, the sheath still works with when the pocket clip is on or off. Right now I have it off and, you know, it still retains well. Actually, if I put the pocket clip on, the retention will be even better because then the screws on the pocket clip will actually go into these little dents here on the sheath. Anyway, the next part of this video, I'll just kind of edit in the final sheath and show you guys what I decided to do with it, you know, how much I decided to cut and where I decided to place the rivets. Okay guys, get the respirator off. A quick update before I finish up the sheath. As you can see here, I've basically cut out the excess material that I didn't want. I've also sanded it down quite a bit, you know, smoothed out any rough edges that there were, like especially here at these corners, you know, where there are normally points. You want to smooth them out so they don't dig into you. If you happen to carry like that where it can dig into you. One thing I would suggest is before you do any kind of cutting or sanding, a lot of people like to rivet the sheaths first, but it makes it very difficult to clean. And especially when you're drilling into the Kydex, you want to definitely go in there with, you know, a sharp razor blade and really knock off any kind of burrs, any excess material that's stuck in there when you're drilling through. Because what happens is when you drill, one end will usually start lifting up because of that drill, and then you'll just get crud stuck in there. So you definitely want to clean that out really cleanly and nicely before you actually rivet it. At this point here, I did basically most of my sanding is done. The only thing is if I actually line up the holes for the rivets and I look at the side of the sheath, I can see that, you know, you probably won't be able to see in the camera, but it's actually a little mismatched. So what that means is that, you know, generally what happens is on the open end, it's very difficult for me to actually get this nice and straight. Obviously on this end where it's closed and it's together, it's very easy for me to sand it so that it's very, like, you know, it's very even. Here, not so much because I tend to just do one side at a time. It's hard to match it up. And then what I do is I'll actually have a piece of sandpaper that's flat on a flat surface and I'll sand across it. But as you can see here, because it's not riveted yet, it'll actually shift a little bit and you'll actually get some unevenness. So what I'm going to do is before I actually rivet it up, I'm going to stick the rivets in here so the holes line up, do my final sanding, re-clean the sheath again because there's going to be a lot of Kydex powder, and then do the final rivet. And after I do that, I will, you know, turn the camera on again and show you guys the final product.